boardroom was cold. No, the kind of cold that comes from air conditioning, but the kind that crawls under your skin when you realize every single person in the room is watching you fall apart and not one of them is going to catch you. She stood near the back wall, binder pressed against her chest like a shield, her fingers trembling just enough that the papers inside made a faint rattling sound she prayed no one could hear. But they heard it, and they enjoyed it. The man at the front of the room, the one with the tailored suit and the smile that could cut glass, he pointed directly at her and said the words that would echo through every hallway of that building for weeks. "You are nothing," that died red. "You have nothing, you are nothing, and if you ever open your mouth in one of my meetings again, I will make sure no firm in this city even remembers your name." The room didn't gasp. That would have meant they cared. Instead, the room did something worse. It laughed, a few quiet chuckles, a couple of smirks hidden behind coffee cups. One woman near the window actually shook her head and whispered. What did she expect? And the girl standing there, the one with the second-hand blazer and the bus pass in her pocket, and the bracelet on her wrist she had worn every single day since she was old enough to remember having it. She did the only thing she had ever been taught to do. She lowered her eyes. She swallowed the fire in her throat, and she walked out of that room without making a sound. But here is what nobody in that glass tower knew. No, the executives adjusting their cufflinks. No, the analysts refreshing their spreadsheets. No, the arrogant man still basking in the applause of his own cruelty. The quiet girl they just humiliated. The intern they treated like furniture. The one they told was nothing. She was the missing heiress to a $40 billion empire. And the man who had spent 23 years searching for her across 4 continents. The man who had spent more money looking for one child than most countries spend on infrastructure. That man had just stepped out of a black armored SUV in the parking garage beneath the building. He was in the elevator. He was on his way up. And when he walked through those boardroom doors, everything, and I mean everything, was about to change. But before I tell you what happened next, and trust me, you are not ready for what happened next, let me take you back to where this all started. Because this story is not just about power. It is not just about revenge. This is a story about what happens when the world underestimates the wrong person, and if you believe that the people who stay silent are sometimes the most powerful people in the room, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Mr. Andy Love Stories and turn on notifications, because this one is going to stay with you long after it ends. And if this story moves you, and I promise you it will, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. No, let me take you back before the billions. Before the DNA test, before the man in the elevator changed everything. Let me take you back to a girl named Leora Voss, and the life she was living before the world found out who she really was. Leora's alarm went off every morning at 4:30. No, because she was ambitious. No, because she was trying to impress anyone. But because the only bus that could get her across the city in time for work left at 5:15, and if she missed it, she would have to walk 40 minutes in whatever weather the sky decided to throw at her. Her apartment, if you could call it that, was a studio on the 6th floor of a building that smelled like damp carpet and someone else's cooking. The elevator had been broken for 2 years. The hot water worked about half the time. The walls were thin enough that she could hear her neighbor's television through the plaster every single night. She had no family, no safety net. No one to call when things got hard, and no one to celebrate with when things went right. She had aged out of the foster care system at 18 with a garbage bag full of clothes. A ged and a bracelet she had worn since before she could remember. The bracelet was delicate, hand-woven threads of gold and ivory, twisted together like a tiny rope. At the center hung a small pendant shaped like a star, no bigger than a fingernail. On the back, engraved in script so fine you had to hold it under direct light to read it, was a single word. Leora, the orphanage, had told her it was with her when she was brought in as an infant. No note, no name of a parent, no return address. Just a baby wrapped in a hospital blanket, with a bracelet on her wrist and no one in the world to claim her. She used to lie awake as a child, turning the pendant over in her fingers, wondering who had made it, wondering if the hands that wove those threads had loved her. wondering if somewhere out there someone was looking for her the way she was looking for them. She never got an answer, so she stopped asking. By the time she was 23, Leora had taught herself to want nothing from anyone. She worked, she studied, she survived. And when she landed an internship at Davenport and Hale, one of the most powerful financial firms on the eastern seaboard, she told herself this was her chance. No, to be seen. No, to be praised. Just to prove, quietly to herself, that she could stand in the same room as people who had been given everything and still hold her own. She was wrong about a lot of things back then, but she was not wrong about that. Davenport and Hale occupied the top 12 floors of a skyscraper downtown. The lobby was white marble, the elevators were glass. The people who worked there wore watches that cost more than Leora's rent for a year. Everything about the place was designed to make you feel like you either belonged or you didn't. And if you didn't, you would know it within 5 minutes of walking through the door. Leora knew it within 3. On her first day, she rode the elevator to the 42nd floor and stepped out into a hallway that smelled like fresh espresso and dry, cleaned wool. A woman at the reception desk looked her up and down, paused just long enough for the silence to say everything, and then pointed toward a desk in the far corner of the open floor. "That one is yours." It was the smallest desk on the floor, pushed against the wall near the printer bay where the fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered. The chair wobbled. The monitor was a model at least 5 years older than everyone else's. There was no nameplate. Leora sat down. She opened her notebook, and she got to work. She did not complain. No, once. No, when they gave her tasks no one else wanted. No, when they forgot to include her in team emails. No, when she spent an entire week building a financial model from scratch, only to watch a senior analyst paste it into his own presentation without mentioning her name. She ate lunch alone every day. No, in the company cafeteria where the analysts gathered in clusters and talked about ski trips and stock options. She ate on a bench behind the building next to a dumpster where no one could see her pull a sandwich from a paper bag, while everyone else swiped corporate cards at the bistro across the street. She was invisible, and for a while invisible felt safe. But invisible was not enough for Marcus Hale. Marcus Hale was the kind of man who was born on third base and spent his entire life telling everyone he hit a triple. His grandfather had co-founded Davenport and Hale. His father had run the mergers division for 20 years. Marcus himself had been handed a senior executive title before he turned 30, not because he earned it, but because his last name was etched into the building's foundation. He was tall, handsome, impeccably dressed, and completely, irreversibly cruel. No, the loud kind of cruel that gets reported to human resources, a quiet kind, the kind that hides behind charm and humor and plausible deniability, the kind that makes you question whether you are overreacting, whether you are too sensitive, whether maybe he is right and you really are as small as he makes you feel. Marcus did not just ignore the interns. He collected them. He kept mental scorecards of who flinched the fastest, who cried first, who could be broken with the fewest words. It was a game to him. A sport, and Leora was his favorite target. It started small. A coffee order barked across the floor without a please or thank you. A stack of files dropped on her desk at 5:59 on a Friday, with the instruction to have them sorted by Monday morning. A comment about her shoes made just loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "Are those from a thrift store, or did you find them on the bus?" The analysts laughed. No, because it was funny, but because laughing with Marcus was safer than being his next target. Then it escalated. One afternoon, Leora spent 11 hours building a revenue projection model for a client presentation. She triple-checked every number, she formatted every slide. She emailed it to Marcus's assistant with a full summary and her name clearly noted as the author. The next morning, Marcus presented the model to the executive team. Every slide, every number, every insight under his name. When Leora quietly mentioned to his assistant that the work was hers, the assistant looked at her with a mixture of pity and warning. Interns don't get credit, interns get experience. Be grateful you are even in the room. Leora said nothing. She went back to her desk. She opened her notebook. She kept working. Another time, during a 2-hour department meeting, every chair round the conference table was taken. Marcus looked at Leora standing near the door and said, with a smile that looked almost friendly if you didn't know what lived behind it, "We are a little short on chairs today. You don't mind standing, do you? It is good for the circulation." She stood for 2 hours. Her feet ached. Her back burned. No one offered their seat. No one even looked uncomfortable. And through all of it, through every slight, every insult, every small act of erasure, Leora held herself together with the kind of quiet discipline that only people who have survived real hardship understand. She did not cry at her desk. She did not vent to co-workers. She did not fire back. She filed every moment away in a place deep inside her chest, where the fire burned low and constant, and she told herself the same thing she had told herself every day since she was 18 years old. This is temporary. I am not, but there was one person on that floor who saw her, really saw her. His name was Tobias Crane. He was the head of building maintenance. He had calloused hands and kind eyes, and a habit of fixing things before anyone noticed they were broken. He was the kind of man who existed in the background of other people's lives, always present, never acknowledged, never thanked. On Leora's first week, before she had spoken more than 20 words to anyone on the floor, she came in one morning and noticed that her wobbly desk chair had been replaced with a sturdy one. No note, no explanation, just a chair that didn't lean anymore. A few days later, she found a small desk lamp sitting in the supply closet near her workstation. Taped to it was a piece of paper with neat handwriting. "The fluorescent lights in this corner flicker after 6 p.m. Thought you might need this." She plugged in the lamp that evening, and for the first time in weeks, her little corner of the 42nd floor felt almost warm. She never mentioned the lamp. He never asked if she found it. That was how things worked between them. Small kindnesses exchanged without ceremony, a sandwich split in half one afternoon, when he noticed she did not have lunch and said simply, "I made too much," a nod in the hallway that carried more warmth than every corporate greeting she had ever received combined. Once, just once, he said something to her that she would remember for the rest of her life. They were both in the break room. She was filling a water bottle. He was restocking paper towels. He glanced at her for a moment, not the way the analysts glanced at her, with disinterest or disdain, but with something that felt like recognition. "You don't carry yourself like someone who is nothing," he said quietly. "You carry yourself like someone who is waiting." She looked at him. He did not elaborate. He did not ask what she was waiting for. He simply finished with the paper towels, gave her that quiet nod, and walked out. She stood there for a long time after he left, holding her water bottle, feeling something she had not felt in years. Seen, but being seen by one kind man was not enough to protect her from what was coming. Because the moment that would crack everything open, the moment that would shatter the fragile piece she had built around herself, was already on the calendar. The quarterly review. It was the most important meeting of the fiscal cycle. Every department head, every senior associate, every managing director packed into the glass-walled conference room on the executive floor. Marcus was presenting the annual projections. The data had been compiled by the analytics team, but the backup materials, the binders, the summary sheets, the supplementary models, those had been assigned to Leora. She worked until 2 in the morning the night before. She checked every decimal point. She cross-referenced every source. She made sure that every figure in those binders was bulletproof, because she knew that if anything went wrong, the blame would not land on the people at the top of the table. It would land on the girl in the corner. The meeting began at 9 a.m. sharp. Marcus stood at the front of the room with the easy confidence of a man who had never been questioned in his life. He clicked through the slides one by one: revenue growth, market share, client acquisition rates, and then he reached slide 14. Leora saw it immediately. A decimal point, 2 positions off, it inflated the projected revenue by nearly $40 million. It was the kind of error that would not just embarrass the firm, it would destroy their credibility with the client, a client worth over $200 million in annual contracts. Her stomach tightened. She looked around the room. No one else had caught it. The executives were nodding along. The analysts were taking notes. Marcus was already moving to slide 15. She had a choice. Stay silent, stay invisible, stay safe, or speak up, be correct, and risk everything. She stood up. "Excuse me." The room turned. Marcus stopped mid-sentence. His hand hovered over the clicker. "The projection on slide 14, the decimal is misplaced. The actual figure should be closer to 12 million, not 40. Silence. Marcus stared at her. No. With surprise. No. With curiosity. With the cold, focused fury of a man whose authority had just been challenged by the one person in the room he considered least worthy of breathing the same air. "I am sorry. Did the intern just interrupt my presentation?" His voice was calm, dangerously calm. Leora's hands trembled, but she did not sit down. "The number is wrong. If we present this to the client, we will lose their trust." Marcus took a step toward her, then another, close enough that she could smell his cologne, close enough that the entire room could see the power dynamic playing out in real time, the lion and the lamb, the throne and the floor. "Let me make something very clear to you," he said, and his voice was quiet now, but the kind of quiet that is louder than shouting. "You are nothing. You are nothing. You are nothing. And if you ever open your mouth in one of my meetings again, I will make sure you don't just lose this internship. I will make sure no firm in this city remembers your name." Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Nobody defended her. The woman near the window shook her head. An analyst near the door looked down at his phone. Marcus's assistant studied her fingernails. Leora picked up her binder. She walked to the door. She opened it. She stepped through it. She closed it behind her. And she made it exactly 14 steps down the hallway before her legs stopped working, and she pressed her back against the cold concrete wall of the stairwell and let the tears come. No, because she believed him, but because for one terrible, airless, suffocating moment the entire world had agreed with him. She cried for exactly 3 minutes. Then she wiped her face. She straightened her blazer. She touched the bracelet on her wrist, the one with the star, the one that someone, somewhere, had made with love, and she whispered to herself the same thing she always whispered. "This is temporary. I am not." She did not know it yet, but she was right. Because 6,000 miles away, a man who had never stopped searching was about to change everything. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a room where someone made you feel like you did not exist, where your voice was silenced, and nobody stood up for you? Drop a fire emoji in the comments if you have ever been underestimated, because what happens next in this story is for you. And if you have not already, subscribe and hit that bell so you never miss a story like this one. No, let me take you across the ocean, to a penthouse in London, to a man sitting in the blue glow of a laptop screen at 3 in the morning, to a photograph he has been staring at for 23 years. Julian Ashford did not sleep much anymore. He had not slept well since the night his world ended, and over time insomnia had become less of a condition and more of a companion, something that sat beside him in the dark while he scrolled through reports and databases and investigator updates and dead ends. A photograph on his desk was old, creased along the center from being folded and unfolded 1,000 times. The edges were soft, the colors had faded, but the image was still clear enough to break his heart every single time he looked at it. A woman lying in a hospital bed, her dark hair spread across the pillow, her eyes tired but radiant. In her arms, a newborn baby wrapped in a pale yellow blanket, and around the baby's tiny wrist, a bracelet, hand-woven, gold and ivory threads. A small, star-shaped pendant no bigger than a fingernail. The woman's name was Ilara. She was the love of Julian's life, and she had been dead for 23 years. Julian Ashford was not merely wealthy, he was the kind of wealthy that reshapes geography. Founder and sole owner of Ashford Global, a conglomerate that spanned telecommunications, aerospace, energy, and luxury real estate across 6 continents. His name appeared on Forbes lists with the same inevitability as sunrise. Governments consulted him, industries pivoted when he spoke. His net worth was measured not in millions, but in the kind of figures that require scientific notation to feel real. But none of it mattered. None of it had ever mattered, because the only thing Julian Ashford wanted, The only thing he had wanted for 23 years was the one thing his money could not buy. His daughter Ilara had died from complications during childbirth. A hemorrhage the doctors could not stop. A cascade of failures that turned a moment of joy into the worst night of Julian's life. He held her hand as she slipped away. He told her their daughter was beautiful. He told her he would protect her. He told her everything would be okay. He lied about all of it except the first one. Because in the chaos that followed Ilara's death, chaos compounded by a fire that broke out in the hospital's east wing, their newborn daughter disappeared. An evacuation, a power outage, staff running through smoke-filled corridors carrying infants to safety, records destroyed, patient logs burned, and when the ashes settled and the roll call was taken, one baby was unaccounted for. Julian's baby. The investigation that followed was massive, exhaustive, and ultimately futile. Police, private detectives, Interpol. Julian threw every resource he had at the search. He offered rewards that made international headlines. He hired forensic specialists, genealogists, data analysts, anyone and everyone who might be able to trace the thread of a missing child through the labyrinth of a broken system. Years passed. Tips came in. All of them led nowhere. Julian followed each one anyway. He flew to cities on 3 continents, chasing shadows. He sat in government offices and begged bureaucrats to reopen closed cases. He appeared on television and held up the photograph and asked, with a voice that cracked under the weight of its own hope, "Have you seen this child?" No one had. The only clue he had left was the bracelet. Ilara had woven it herself the night before she went into labor. Julian had watched her sit cross-legged on their bedroom floor, threading the gold and ivory strands together with careful, loving fingers. She had chosen the pendant, a star, because she said their daughter would be a light in the darkness. She had engraved the name they had chosen together on the back. Leora, it meant my light, 23 years. That is how long Julian searched, through every dead end, every false lead, every night that ended with him staring at that photograph and wondering if his daughter was alive, if she was safe, if she was loved, if she even knew someone was looking for her. And then 3 months before this story reaches its turning point, a forensic genealogist named Dr. Petra Wynne made a discovery that would change everything. She had been cross-referencing DNA samples from the hospital's archived records, fragments preserved from the newborn screening that had been conducted before the fire, with public and semi-public genetic databases. It was painstaking work. Most of the samples were degraded. Most of the matches were false positives, but one was not. A college health screening database in the United States contained a DNA profile that matched the hospital sample with 99.7% certainty. Dr. Wynne ran it again, then a 4th time. The match held. Julian's daughter was alive. She was 23 years old. She was living in a city on the east coast of the United States, and she was working as an unpaid intern at a financial firm called Davenport and Hale. Julian sat in his penthouse and read the report 3 times. His hands shook so badly he could barely hold the pages. He did not cry. He was beyond tears. He was in that place past grief where the body simply shuts down every response except the one that matters most. Go to her within 48 hours. Julian did something that made headlines in the financial press, but whose true motive no one understood. He acquired Davenport and Hale, the entire firm, every share, every asset, every floor of that glass tower. He did not do it for the portfolio. He did not do it for the market position. He did it because his daughter was inside that building, and he was not going to ask permission to walk through the door. He booked a private flight. He told no one the real reason. His chief of staff asked if she should arrange meetings with the firm's senior leadership. Julian said only one thing: "I need to see someone." The morning Julian Ashford arrived at Davenport and Hale, the energy in the building shifted like the air before a thunderstorm. Heavy electric charged with something no one could name but everyone could feel. There had been no advance notice, no memo, no calendar invite. The acquisition had been finalized through intermediaries and holding companies, and the staff had been told only that new ownership would introduce itself in due course. Due course arrived in the form of a black armored SUV pulling into the underground parking structure at 8:45 a.m. 4 private security personnel stepped out first. Then Julian. He wore a charcoal suit. No tie, his silver hair was combed back. His face carried the kind of calm that only comes from years of navigating rooms where everyone wants something from you. He walked through the lobby without pausing, without looking at the marble walls or the glass elevators or the enormous Davenport and Hale logo etched into the reception desk. He walked like a man who owned the building. Because he did, word traveled fast. By the time Julian reached the 42nd floor, half the building knew. Ties were straightened. Desks were cleared. Coffee was brewed with an urgency that bordered on panic. Marcus Hale intercepted him near the elevator bank. Of course he did. Marcus had a radar for Power, and when Power walked through the door, Marcus was always the first to extend a hand and a smile. Mr. Ashford, what an honor. Welcome to Davenport and Hale. I am Marcus Hale. I run our executive strategy division, and I would love to personally walk you through our... I know who you are, Julian said. He did not take Marcus's hand. He did not return the smile. He looked at Marcus the way you look at an obstacle you have already decided to remove. Marcus's smile faltered, just barely, just enough. Julian's eyes moved past him, past the analysts who had gathered in the hallway, past the glass offices and the mahogany conference tables. He was scanning the floor, the way a searchlight sweeps the ocean, methodical, relentless, looking for one thing and one thing only. And then he found it. She was standing near the printer bay, a stack of reports in her arms, her shoulders drawn inward, her eyes down. She looked exactly like what she was, a young woman who had been trained by the world to take up as little space as possible. But Julian did not see an intern. He did not see a girl in a second-hand blazer. He saw 23 years of searching. He saw Ilara's eyes. He saw the curve of a jawline that was so familiar it nearly buckled his knees. And on her left wrist, half hidden beneath the cuff of her sleeve, he saw a bracelet, hand-woven gold and ivory, a small star-shaped pendant catching the fluorescent light. The reports Julian was holding slipped from his fingers and scattered across the floor. He did not pick them up. He did not even notice. He walked toward her, slowly, the way you walk towards something you have been afraid to believe in for 2 decades. The way you approach a miracle when you are terrified. It will vanish if you move too fast. Every person on the floor stopped what they were doing. Keyboards went silent. Phones went unanswered. The entire 42nd floor held its breath. That bracelet, Julian said. His voice was barely above a whisper. Where did you get it? Leora looked up, startled, confused. She had no idea who this man was. She saw only the suit, the security detail, hovering 10 steps behind him, the way every person in her line of sight had frozen in place. I have always had it, she stammered, since I was a baby. The orphanage said it was with me when I was brought in. It is the only thing I have from... She stopped, because something in this man's face made her stop. Something she had never seen directed at her before. No pity, no curiosity, no the cold appraisal she had grown used to. Recognition. Your mother made that bracelet, Julian said, and his voice broke on the word mother in a way that told you this was a wound that had never healed. Her name was Ilara. She wove it herself. The night before you were born. The star is because she said you would be a light in the darkness, and the name on the back. He could not finish. His jaw tightened, his eyes filled with tears. Leora looked down at the pendant. She turned it over with trembling fingers. The engraving she had traced 1,000 times. The word she had always assumed was just a name some stranger chose. Leora, it means my light, Julian whispered. I have been looking for you for 23 years. The floor was completely silent. No, the uncomfortable silence of the boardroom 2 weeks earlier. A different kind of silence. The kind that falls when something sacred is happening, and even the air knows to be still. Leora stared at this man, this trembling, powerful, broken, beautiful stranger, and for the first time in her life, the bracelet on her wrist did not feel like a mystery. It felt like an answer. The DNA test took 4 hours, during which the entire building existed in suspended animation. Nobody could concentrate. Nobody pretended to work. Rumors moved through the floors like smoke, whispered in hallways, texted under desks, murmured in bathroom stalls with the door locked. The intern, the billionaire, the bracelet. Is it real? Marcus Hale sat in his corner office with the door closed and the blinds drawn. He did not make phone calls. He did not check emails. He sat very still and did the math in his head and did not like the numbers he arrived at. Leora waited in the conference room, the same conference room where 2 weeks earlier she had been told she was nothing. She sat in one of the leather chairs, the ones she had never been allowed to sit in, and she stared at the bracelet on her wrist and tried to make her heart slow down. Julian waited in the hallway outside. He could not sit. He paced. His security team watched him with the careful eyes of men who had seen him negotiate with presidents, and never once seen him this nervous. When the results arrived, Julian read them alone. He held the paper in both hands. He read it once, then again, then a third time, because some things are too enormous to absorb in a single pass. The match was confirmed, 99.98%, beyond statistical doubt, beyond question, beyond the reach of fate to take back. Julian pressed the paper against his chest. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in 23 years he wept. No, the restrained, dignified tears of a man who controls boardrooms, the raw, shaking, full-body tears of a father who has found his child. He walked into the conference room. Leora looked up. Her eyes were wide. Her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. Julian sat down across from her. He placed the paper on the table between them, and he said 3 words, "You are my daughter." Leora did not speak. She could not. She looked at the paper. She looked at the man across the table. She looked at the bracelet on her wrist, and then something inside her, something she had been holding together with sheer will and silence for 23 years, finally let go. No, the way things break, the way things open, the way a door opens when you have been knocking on it your entire life, and finally someone on the other side turns the handle. She cried, and for the first time she did not cry alone. Julian came around the table and sat beside her and held her the way a father holds a child he thought he would never hold, awkward and fierce and trembling and sure. And through the glass walls of that conference room, the entire 42nd floor watched, and not a single person said a word. The next morning, every employee at Davenport and Hale was summoned to the main atrium. This was not a request. It was a directive from the new owner. Julian stood at the front of the room. Beside him stood Leora. No, in the corner. No, against the wall. No, invisible beside him. She was wearing the same bracelet, the same star pendant. But something about the way she stood had changed. No arrogance, no defiance, just the quiet, rooted stillness of a woman who had finally found the ground beneath her feet. Julian spoke. His voice was calm but weighted with the kind of authority that does not need volume. 23 years ago, I lost my daughter, a hospital fire, a broken system, a child who vanished before I could even hold her. I have searched for her every day since. I have spent every resource available to me. I have never stopped. He paused. Let the silence do its work. Yesterday, I found her. She has been working in this building as an intern, and I have been told in great detail how she was treated here. His eyes moved through the crowd, slowly, deliberately, landing on face after face. Some looked away. Some could not. Effective immediately. Leora Ashford is the principal heir to the Ashford Global Estate and the majority stakeholder of this firm. The silence in that atrium was so complete you could hear the ventilation system humming 40 floors above. And let me be absolutely clear about one thing, Julian continued. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. Anyon, who made my daughter feel like she was nothing, is welcome to find out what nothing actually looks like. Starting today. His gaze landed on Marcus Hale. Marcus stood near the back of the crowd. For the first time in his life, he did not have a smile ready. He did not have a quip. He did not have a strategy. He stood there in his tailored suit and his designer shoes, and he looked exactly like what he was. Small. Security approached him 17 minutes later. 2 men in dark suits who did not raise their voices, did not make a scene, simply informed him that his position had been terminated effective immediately, and that he was to be escorted from the premises. No severance, no farewell, no golden parachute. Marcus walked through the lobby one last time, past the marble reception desk, past the glass elevators, past the logo with his family's name that would be removed by the end of the week. He did not look back. Leora watched from the 42nd floor window, the floor she now owned, and the feeling that washed over her was not what she expected. No triumph, no revenge, no, the sharp, sweet satisfaction of someone getting what they deserve, relief. The bone-deep exhale from the bottom of your lungs, relief of a woman who had spent her entire life being invisible and had finally irrevocably been seen. No, I know what you are thinking. That is the end of the story, right? The villain gets what he deserves. The heroine takes her throne. Justice is served. Roll the credits. But this story is not about thrones. And what happens next is the part that will stay with you long after this video ends. Keep watching because the best part is still coming. See, in the days and weeks that followed the reveal, the world around Leora transformed overnight. And I do not mean just the obvious things, the corner office, the security detail, the invitations to galas and board meetings and magazine covers. I mean the people. Suddenly everyone in that building knew her name. Suddenly everyone wanted to sit next to her at lunch. Suddenly the same analysts who had laughed when Marcus humiliated her were stopping by her office with coffee and compliments and carefully rehearsed versions of "I always knew there was something special about you." The woman who had whispered what did she expect was now telling anyone who would listen that she had always felt uneasy about how Leora was treated. The assistant who had told her interns don't get credit now sent her flowers with a card that read "So proud of you." It was performance, all of it. A building full of people who had watched her suffer in silence, now falling over themselves to rewrite history, to position themselves on the right side of a story they had been on the wrong side of for months. Leora saw through every single one of them. She was not angry. She was not bitter. She was simply clear. She had learned long ago how to tell the difference between people who cared about her and people who cared about what she could do for them. And in the middle of all that noise, all that performative kindness, all that sudden and suffocating attention, there was one person who did not change. He still left maintenance notes in neat handwriting, with dry little observations in the margins. He still showed up on time, did his work without ceremony, and treated every person in the building, from the CEO to the cleaning staff, with the same steady, unhurried respect. He did not send flowers. He did not stop by her new office with rehearsed compliments. He did not suddenly remember her name. He had never forgotten it. And that is what Leora noticed. In a world that had become a funhouse mirror of flattery and self-interest, Tobias was the only reflection that had not changed shape. He was the same man he had been when she was nobody. The same man who had fixed her desk and left her a lamp and split his sandwich in half, and said I made too much when they both knew he had not. She started seeking him out. No, for maintenance requests. No, because anything was broken. But because in a life that had suddenly become very loud, Tobias was the quietest, truest thing she knew. They talked in stairwells and supply closets, and on the bench behind the building, where she used to eat lunch alone. He told her about his mother, who had raised him alone and worked double shifts, and taught him that the measure of a person is not what they do when people are watching, but what they do when nobody is. She told him about the foster homes, about the nights she stayed awake turning the bracelet over in her fingers, about the silence of growing up without a single person who was obligated to love you. He listened the way he did everything, completely, without performance, without trying to fix it or fill it or rush past it. He just listened. And when she was done, he said something so simple it nearly broke her. That must have been lonely. No, I am sorry. No, that is terrible. No. Some grand declaration of empathy designed to make himself feel better, just the truth, offered quietly without agenda. That must have been lonely. She almost cried. She did not, but she almost did. One evening in November, 3 weeks after the world found out who she was, Leora went looking for Tobias and found him on the rooftop. He was crouched beside a ventilation unit with a wrench in his hand, and grease on his forearms, working in the kind of focused silence that made the cold wind and the city noise feel very far away. "You are still here," she said. "Vents do not fix themselves," he replied without looking up. "That is not what I meant." He paused, set down the wrench, straightened up, looked at her. The city spread out below them in every direction, towers of glass and steel, rivers of headlights, a world that never stopped demanding, never stopped measuring, never stopped deciding who mattered and who did not. "You are the same person you were before they knew your last name," Tobias said. His voice was quiet but steady, the way a foundation is steady. "That is the person He stopped. The words caught somewhere between his chest and his throat. He looked away, looked at the city, looked at his hands. "The person you what?" Leora asked. She stepped closer. It was the exhale of a man who had carried something silently for a long time and was deciding, in this moment, whether to set it down. "The person I see," he said, "the one I have always seen." Leora stood there in the cold November wind, looking at this man. This quiet, calloused, unpolished man who had never once tried to impress her, who had never wanted anything from her, who had seen her at her smallest and most invisible and decided, without fanfare, without expectation, without knowing anything about who she was or what she was worth, that she deserved a steady place to stand. She reached out and took his hand. No, the hand of a billionaire's daughter reaching down. No, the hand of an heiress bestowing favor. Just a woman reaching across the small and sacred distance between two people who had spent their entire lives being overlooked. And on that rooftop in that wind, with no cameras and no contracts and no boardrooms watching, something happened that was bigger than any empire or inheritance or DNA test. Two people who had always been invisible to the world became completely, permanently, irreversibly visible to each other. And that is the real story. No, the billions. No, the boardroom. No, the bracelet or the DNA test or the look on Marcus Hale's face when the world he thought he owned was taken from him. The real story is this. A man saw a woman, know her name, know her net worth, know her potential usefulness. He saw her, the way she carried herself through a world that had given her nothing and still refused to become hard. The way she treated people with kindness even when no one treated her with kindness in return. The way she sat at that wobbly desk in that flickering corner and worked like she believed she was worth something even when everyone around her said she was not. He saw all of that, and he loved her for it quietly, completely, long before the world caught up. Here is what happened after. Julian Ashford finally found peace. No, the peace that comes from closing a deal or acquiring a company, but the real kind. The kind that settles into your bones when you stop searching for the thing you lost and realize it has been found. He and Leora spent months learning each other, filling in 23 years of silence with stories and meals and the awkward, beautiful, imperfect process of becoming family with someone you have never known, but have always loved. Leora stepped into her role at Ashford Global not as a figurehead, not as a name on a letterhead, but as a leader. She restructured the internship program at Davenport and Hale. She created mentorship initiatives. She implemented policies that ensured no person in that building, no matter how junior their title, would ever be treated as less than human. She did this not because it was good press. She did it because she remembered what it felt like to stand in a room full of people and be completely alone. Marcus Hale faded from the story the way bullies always do when the systems that protected them collapse. No, with a dramatic downfall. No, with a public reckoning, just the quiet gradual irrelevance of a man who mistook cruelty for strength, and discovered too late that they are not the same thing. Last anyone heard, he was working at a mid-level firm in another city, keeping his head down, keeping his mouth shut, learning, perhaps for the first time, what it feels like to be no one special, and Tobias Crane still fixed things, still showed up early, still treated every person he met with the same steady, unshakable kindness that had nothing to do with what they could do for him, and everything to do with who he had decided to be. But now, when he finished his shift and rode the elevator down and walked out into the evening air, he was not alone. Leora was beside him. No. Above him, no. ahead of him, beside him. The way it had always been, the way it would always be. They did not make headlines. They did not appear on magazine covers. They did not perform their love for the cameras. They simply lived it, quietly, honestly, with the kind of certainty that comes from knowing you were chosen not for what you have, but for who you are. They called her nothing, but silence is not emptiness. It is patience. They said she did not belong. But the quiet ones do not need permission to rise. They simply wait for the world to stop talking long enough to notice they have already arrived. Leora Ashford did not become someone the day her name changed. She had always been someone. The world just was not paying attention. And the man who loved her, who truly loved her, never needed a DNA test to know her worth. He knew it the moment he fixed her wobbly desk and decided without fanfare or expectation that she deserved a steady place to stand. Never let anyone tell you what you are, because sometimes the one they dismiss, the one they overlook, the one they mock, the one they call nothing, is the one who inherits everything. No, because of a name, but because of a heart that refused to break. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that your worth is not determined by how others treat you, then do me a favor. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this today. Drop a comment and tell me who in your life saw your worth before anyone else did. I want to hear your story. Subscribe to Mr. Andy Love Stories and turn on notifications, because every week we bring you stories that will move you, inspire you, and remind you that the most powerful thing in this world is not money. It is being seen. I will see you in the next one.